Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Good evening. So we have Mr. Balakrishnan IPS, who's the chairman of the board here, myself, and Mr. Devnath, who's also part of our faculty team. So we'll first have your interview for around 20 minutes or so, and then we'll give you a feedback. Yeah. So sir will start. Yes.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, Swatika, how are you?
I'm good, sir. Thank you, sir.
Can be little louder.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Good, sir. I'm good, sir.
Yeah, right. Okay. So you did your computer engineering in PSG Tech, right?
Yes, sir.
So the technology did not attract you. You have come to the civil services. The technology doesn't offer much future. What is the reason?
So I'm currently working as a software engineer, sir. So technology does attract me, and I find a lot of opportunities here. But civil services is more than about leaving technology and coming to civil services, rather than my passion for service. And I feel I could contribute more to the society by working as a civil servant than as a technology person.
When you talk about passion for service, there is some element of incongruency in what you say and what you opt for. Like your first choice is IFS, right?
Yes.
If you define the passion for service as the direct public service, then IFS offers very little opportunity for that, right? Can you clarify that?
Yes, sir. So IFS, sir, I believe any of the civil services offered gives a lot of opportunity to work for the people of the country. Though IFS might not be able to serve the entire, it does work for the diaspora present. And more than that, through diplomacy, though it is an indirect way of serving the people, but through diplomacy, a lot of goodwill comes to our country, and it in turn affects our country's growth and development, sir. So it serves the larger interest of the society, sir.
But the evidence shows otherwise. See, take for the example of recent COVID situation. After the first wave, India started exporting, medicines, vaccines, and then medicines which is used for treatment of COVID to other countries as part of diplomatic efforts, right? If you ask a diplomat, he will say that it was a wonderful initiative. Whereas now, in the second wave, that is criticized by everyone now, right? There is a basic mismatch between the, what you call the measures you use to extend the benefits of diplomacy and the domestic situation. So how do you look at it?
So diplomacy's first interest is always the national interest. So any initiative that is taken by the diplomat puts the centrality of Indians first before doing it. But when the initiative for Vaccine Maitri was taken, there was not a second wave. It had started a little later, and that's why this plan of Vaccine Maitri. And more than that, sir, out of the 600 lakh vaccines that were exported, more of them falls under our compulsive obligations because of voluntary licensing from AstraZeneca and through the COVAX program, more than the diplomatic efforts of goodwill, sir. So diplomacy, though it is seen as a backlash against our interest, but in the longer run, the goodwill that we had put in the earlier months has been returned to us by many countries now through vaccine imports, or a lot of oxygen plants, oxygen generators are being coming, sir. So it has a give and take, and ultimately we have benefited from it, sir.
So you mean to say that it was more of a compulsion than a proactive diplomatic initiative?
So it had a diplomatic initiative as well, sir, to get the goodwill of the neighbors and the extended neighbors, sir. But when we consider why did we put goodwill in the place of Indians whom we could have saved, then it comes as a compulsive obligation than the goodwill, sir. So we did not put our interest in the back burner, sir.
In the forefront.
So I'm saying by exporting, we did not mean to put our national interest in the back burner.
Okay, right. So I'm very impressed with your extracurricular activities, hobbies. You are into adventure sports, right?
Yes, sir.
What kind of adventure sports?
So I have tried a lot of sports, sir. Skydiving, parasailing, and paragliding. Rappelling and others.
Where did you do?
So I've done across, but mostly it was in the US when I had gone for the on-site.
Okay, skydiving you did.
Yes, sir.
How many meters?
Sir, 18,000 feet, sir.
Very good, 18,000. Right. So volunteering you have mentioned, right?
Yes, sir.
Volunteering, see, you have stayed in the USA also.
Yes.
USA, or for that matter, most of the Western countries have incorporated volunteering into their every system.
Yes.
Like for example, volunteering is compulsory in colleges, and then they get some points for volunteering, which is helpful in getting jobs, right? Whereas in India, volunteering, though it is part of our tradition, but still volunteering is not put into our system, right? If you are posted as the district collector, how will you address this issue?
So,
and you can, being a technocrat, you can use your technology also.
Yes,
to do that.
Yes, sir. So first of all, the district management has to have a collaboration with all the NGOs and volunteers and start looking for a collaboration between them in all the initiatives. Sir. So when the district management approaches them, there's more of a motivation for them to do as well. And we can also try incentivizing volunteers, especially in areas where not many people willingly take it up. We can also use technology like the social media to create awareness about the various opportunities available, sir. And volunteering, it can, so recently an initiative to make NCC as an elective subject. Similar to that, volunteering and making contributions to the society can also be made one of the elective subjects in the colleges, sir.
Okay. So, do we have in Tamil Nadu, you are from Tamil Nadu, do you have in Tamil Nadu any, major volunteering initiatives? Have you come across any organized volunteering?
Sir, there is Sirutuli NGO in NGO, which is volunteering to conserve water bodies. And yes, so there is an NGO called E-Vaguparai, which is spreading education among the rural children through digital initiatives. And I have no.
Okay, right. Rangarajan, please go ahead.
Yeah. So, Swatika.
Yes, sir.
So, you are a student of political science and international relations.
Yes, sir.
So, how do you view the recent flare-up which happened in the Gaza Strip? So, do you think Israel was right or Palestine was right? What is your view on that?
So it can be taken both the ways, sir. First of all, the escalation by Gaza is also it is also in a defensive way because their people were being evicted from their land. So that caused the initial tension, and this led to Gaza coming in support of the larger Palestinians. So that is also justified. At the same time, Israel's right to defend their own civilians from attack, and that's why they started retaliating. So both can be both is justified in their own interest of their citizens.
I asked, what is your view?
Sir, I feel both were justified, sir, but though both were justified, at the same time, we should not have, as a larger international community, we should not have let the problem go in for 11 days, sir. International community should have been able to give a platform for dialogue between the two, and peace should have come early, sir. But both their causes were justified in a way, sir.
So you're already speaking like a diplomat, but diplomacy doesn't work that way. No, you need to take firm positions in the international dealings as a country. You cannot say this is also right, that is also right. That doesn't help, isn't it? Anyways, so there is this farm agitation which is going on, isn't it? And there's been a lot of mudslinging against the agitating farmers, saying that, they're all part of Khalistani movement, and so many other things also going the rounds. So what is your view about the farmers' agitation? And in the present pandemic situation, do you think it is justified for them to continue with their agitation?
So farmers' agitation is mainly because of the insecurity among the farmers, that their livelihood is at stake, and their profits might decrease when when the mandis, when there is a delicensing from the mandis, and when they can sell directly to any customer. So that's why they feel insecure about their livelihoods. So they, as a protest perspective, it is a rightful platform to put forward their take on the laws. However, it should not have been a violent protest. There should have been more negotiations rather than going for violence. And in the present time during COVID, it is completely unwarranted, sir, because they have to understand their life is at stake again when they protest during COVID times, because it's a large gathering. They're not only putting their life at stake, but people who gather around, and even the security personnel, instead of concentrating all the manpower and resources that we have right now in the COVID pandemic, it would put a lot of people's life at stake.
Okay. So what is your view on the recent Citizenship Amendment Act, Swatika? It created a lot of apprehension amongst the minority community in our country. So how do you look at it from your perspective?
So the Citizenship Amendment Act to give, which reduces the number of years that they have to stay in the country for applying for citizenship, applies to 6 religious communities from 3 neighboring countries. While a large of other minority religious communities, they protested, saying their rights are being hindered because of this amendment. It is no way going to affect the citizens who are already part of the country. That has to be made aware to them. At the same time, it is just a temporary amendment which is giving citizenship for 3 neighboring countries and 6 religious communities, but there is no permanence here that any other religious community will not be considered in the future.
But during the Bangladesh war, a Hindu might have also crossed over, a Muslim might have also crossed over, because they needed some economic activity. So how can you say that the Hindu came here because of religious persecution, but the Muslim came here because he wanted to illegally migrate? Don't you think it is discrimination on the basis of religion, which is against the ethos of our constitution?
Yes, sir. But when the Bangladeshi war happened, most of the victims had been the Hindu and the Buddhist communities, and it was not perpetuated against the Muslim communities. So there
How do
was
you say that? And even if it is just one individual, Article 14, Article 21 is applicable even to one individual in this country, no? And he need not be even a citizen of this country to enjoy Article 14 and Article 19. Sorry, Article 21. So right to life and liberty is equally there, no? For even the migrant, a Muslim migrant from Bangladesh who has made this his home.
So the law that Citizenship Amendment Act comes into effect considering the migrants from 1974. Sir. So whoever had fled to India during the 1971 war
it doesn't say anything like that. It doesn't say anything like that. It says anybody who has been here from 2014 to 2019, even if they're illegal immigrants, it doesn't matter. As long as they belong to these 6 communities other than Muslims, you'll get citizenship automatically.
Yes, sir. So when we so it is basically from 1974 to 2019, sir. So it does not bring the persecution that happened during the war per se. It is talking about the migrants who came to India after the war period, when there was no aggression to life per se. It is mainly dealing with the religious persecution that happened.
So you think the present law in its present form is absolutely fine? There is no need to change anything.
So it's not. It is not completely fine, because it is, as you said, it is giving priority to 6 religious communities. But that does not mean that any in the future no community will be accepted. So if there is proper statistics and justification that more communities are also coming from Afghanistan or as well as from Bangladesh, then those would be considered in the future. Currently, it is considering the survey of the number of migrants whom we have. These 6 communities have been given the priorities.
Okay. Devnath.
Swatika, good note.
Good evening.
You've been vaccinated, Swatika?
No, sir.
Okay. Have you had a chance to see the CoWIN site?
So
I checked for vaccination slots.
Yes, sir. I was not able to register, sir.
Okay. So that in itself brings up a point. You being a computer engineer, what are the changes that needs to be brought into the CoWIN website?
Yes, sir. So first of all, it has to be customer friendly by not asking for a lot of documentation. And since we have Aadhaar and DigiLocker all connected, just by giving the sign in with the DigiLocker, we should be able to take everything from there, not we having to upload the documents all the time. And secondly, the scale of it has to be increased, sir. Though it is a web application, it is able, the first day of its opening for 18 plus, it crashed, the system crashed and not many were able to log in. So it has to consider the population who will be trying to use that system, sir.
So what needs to be done to make sure that that doesn't happen, the crashing of the server does not happen?
So we have to predict properly the number of people who will be accessing the system at that time. And then based on that, we have to increase the number of servers to accommodate such large web requests.
Okay. Now, we've been talking about vaccines, and India has a contradictory stand in terms of vaccines and TRIPS flexibilities, right? So here in the in the WTO, along with South Africa, it has pushed for liberalizing the vaccine scheme, removal of patents and all that. But here it is reluctant to give a compulsory license to the companies producing vaccines.
Yes.
How would you explain it?
Yes, at least Covaxin, if not for Covishield, should have been open for compulsory licensing, as Covaxin is completely an indigenous product. At the same time, if the it has been funded through the public money.
So that is fine. You're saying what should be done. I'm asking, why isn't the government doing it? Can you talk for the government?
Yes, sir. So the government's perspective is that if compulsory licensing is being used, compulsory licensing is it should be used as a very very rare and at the last moment approach, because it brings a lot of tension in the investment into India in the first place. When we are forced to open up for compulsory licensing, then the trust that the foreign company has on Indian political system will get eroded, and it might affect the future investments into the country. And similarly, compulsory licensing, it is just like a TRIPS waiver. It's just going to open the license, but that does not going to open the technology involved in producing the vaccine. So it might take another 5 to 6 months at least to backtrack and find out the procedure for production. So instead of doing that and making the foreign companies angry over this over the compulsory licensing, it would be better to convince them at the TRIPS level and go for vaccine pooling rather than patent waiving.
Okay, I am an official at the WTO. Imagine I'm from the EU, right? You're representing India, and I ask you, see, in your country you have a Patents Act, you have the provision to compulsorily license a vaccine. Why are you coming here and pressing for TRIPS flexibilities with us? First, do what you can in your country, and then you can come and argue here. I am from the EU. Imagine, what would you say, talking on behalf of India?
So that said, again, compulsory licensing, even EU, if we make a compulsory licensing, even EU will be one of the first countries to come against it.
No, I am from the EU. I'm asking you, you're supporting it here, you're opposing it in your country. Why is this dichotomy? I'm from the EU. I'm wanting to understand. I'm asking you because you represent India. What would you say?
So ultimately, it's about better relations between India and EU. That's why we are not doing compulsory licensing in the first place. Because AstraZeneca, being a company from UK, if we do compulsory licensing, it is going to make them feel tensed over the political situation here in India, sir. So more than we going in an aggressive way, it will be better to come to negotiations with them and to convince them that it would be in the larger interest to they voluntarily give it rather than we forcing it on them.
Okay, right. So India wants to be an alternative to China in the South Asian region, right? And there is a big problem going on in our backyard in Myanmar, where there is a problem between the civilians and the junta there. And India is least concerned about it. It is expected that if you want to be a world leader, that you at least have a stand on certain issues. What do you think should be India's stand regarding Myanmar, and why is India not reacting at all much?
So India has been flagging the issue of human rights violation in Myanmar. However, it has not taken a definite stand on the issue because it considers the Myanmar coup as an internal issue, as a country that has seen partition, and as a country that is still having its part of the land being discussed in the international arena. It doesn't want to intervene in another country's internal affairs. That is India's first principle from the Panchsheel, sir. And however, if India wants to be a rising power, a great power in the future, then it has to have a stand on every world issue that is happening. Yes, sir, but in that way, India has not intervened because it feels if the military is going to be, Myanmar is a country that has a very fragile democracy, and army has been having the larger hold there. And army has been always supportive of India also. With the increasing presence of China in the backyard, if India goes and tenses up the army, then another neighbor would be lost for India. So that's why India is also not raising the issue.
Okay. So my last question to you, Swatika, being an aspiring diplomat, somebody is asking you, the government is asking you for a solution to the Pakistan problem that we are having. Give me one good solution that you think, in your opinion, would change the equation between India and Pakistan.
Pakistan and India.
Just one thing. I want one thing which you think, okay, this, if we do this idea, if we can implement, then it will be very quite good. What do you think it is?
So I feel India-Pakistan's issue can be made better by giving a lot of people-to-people interactions and collaboration rather than working at the political level or the military level. Because at the end of the day, Pakistan's entire nationalism and entire will of the people has been turned against India. So if we can work towards people first rather than working at the higher levels, then that would be a longer stability in the regions.
But we won't have, as government of India, we won't have access to the people of Pakistan quite immediately. It's only with the government that we need to engage. At the governmental level, what can we do?
So in the people level as well, the initiative by India to give medicines during COVID times and opening up our borders for their medical people to come for medical tourism into India, for coming for sports activities in India, the film personnel to come into India, all we have stopped all this because of the lot of attacks that has been happening. If we can open this and we give a opinion to the people of Pakistan that we are willing to be friendly and we are willing to open up ourselves for your goodwill, then it will then the people itself will people itself will talk against the government to have a better relation with India, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Swatika.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Swatika.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll give you feedback, but I'm just waiting. Balakrishnan sir, I think on and off. Yeah, I think he'll join us back. Yeah, yes, come back. So you're there?
Yes, I'm there, but there's some problem with the signal. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you, sir.
Okay, right. So I don't have any more questions, but I'll just give my observations. Number one is Swatika.
So we lost you again. Hello. Hello. Oh, he's gone now. I think he'll come back. So we'll wait for him to come back. Yeah, he's coming back. No, 1 second. Yeah. Yes, sir. Now we are.
Yeah, I'm joining from my mobile phone.
Yeah.
So, Swatika, I got a lot of positive points. Your, your appearance is very serene, and you are very calm and composed, and then you are very equanimous in your answers. These are very good positive points. But I think you can impart little more energy into your answers. Little bit of excitement is required. You are appearing for a very prestigious, post. The service, All India services, IFS, all very prestigious services. So little bit of excitement is definitely required. So that will add value to your personality. Secondly, I don't know whether consciously you used the phrase district management, because whatever you use, district administration and management, whatever phrase you use, if you are using it consciously, then it is fine. Otherwise, I think generally we use the phrase district administration rather than district management. So that is another observation. I think otherwise you are doing a very good job. Your knowledge is very good. You are able to connect domestic issues and international issues so well, which is definitely required because your first choice is IFS. So you will definitely do well. All the best.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Swatika, yeah. So that's the thing. So I think you're doing well. I mean, you scored 173 last time. You should aim for 200, around 200 marks this time. You'll get it. Yeah, but certain things, see, you are not yet a government servant, right? So you don't have to speak exactly the line of the government. CAA, you can say, that's a, yes, sir, definitely giving accelerated citizenship to people who are persecuted and who have come in is welcome. Because I can sense from your way, you want to defend it, but you personally feel that no, it should have been opened up for all communities and, we shouldn't have discriminated, which is what constitutionally, you're not going to serve the BJP government, right? So while you shouldn't be anti-establishment, whichever government it is, fine. You can always justify and defend the government moves for what it is done to begin with. But also openly say, that's why I think maybe we should have a relook at it. It should, the fear of our Muslim brothers and sisters, our country, that excitement. So those things slightly added. And for the last question of Devnath, see, it's ultimately a board, yeah. People to people contact, you are trying to play it very safe. You should be careful, but you could have just said, make LOC the international border. The problem will hopefully get solved. Something like that. If you want to make it really, no, but don't go to that extent because that can catch you in some other thing. Okay. But say that there should be de-escalation. Yeah, you did a fair job. It's okay. It's no problem. Yes, so just that excitement, as sir said, right? Some more energy in your answer. And don't hold yourself back. It's not that you'll have to completely just defend only the government action. Because you're appearing for the interview. They want to know your personality. You should be balanced. You should uphold constitutional values, right? You should have concern for the poor, irrespective of all sections. So those things, just bring it up.
Okay, sir.
Yeah?
Yes, sir.
All the best. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.